Ivy, and it is my privilege to introduce to you one of the 1992 honorees for the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. And this honoree is a very special woman indeed. She's a real role model for her community. I'd like you to meet Rebecca Porrata. Rebecca, hello.
Hi, Carol.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Now, when I say a role model for your community, do you think of yourself that way? I mean, you've been on, this is a great honor.
Well, I think that I am always looking for role models in women, and oftentimes when I see a Hispanic role model, it makes me feel so good. And so I think that I hope that by the work that I do, and by this video, and by that acknowledgement to the Women's Hall of Fame, that I can be perceived as a role model for young women, but specifically for Hispanic women, because I think we don't have so many role models, at least not in this country.
When you were growing up, did you feel as if you wanted to find Hispanic role models? Or did it just happen to you at some point, perhaps in your education?
I grew up in a household of many women. My mother had 5 girls, and we had, like, it was a very extended family, and there were a lot of tias, aunts, that would come and visit, and always they were very helpful and always very encouraging. So I initially saw them as my role models. I think that I didn't have, outside of my immediate family, too many role models growing up in Southern California.
Tell me about your mother. You mentioned that she did not have the opportunity for an education that was a formal education, and yet she sounds like a fabulous woman. Tell me about your mother.
She had a very difficult life, but despite that, despite the poverty and my father, who had a terrible drinking problem, he was an alcoholic, she was able to instill in us a lot of love and a lot of caring, and always encouraged us to do better. Whenever we would come home from school and there were any questions around issues of bigotry, she always took the time to discuss with us whatever our concerns were, and always seemed to have the right answer, in my opinion. She was a very fair person.
Has that carried over into what you try to do in the community and also with your own children?
Oh, yes.
Do you see your mother in you to some extent?
That's true. I think that a lot of times in growing up, at least I have done this, I'll say there are certain things that I certainly will never do when I raise my children.
We all say that.
Right. And oftentimes when I am with my children, I am my mother. You know, I hear a lot of what my mother said to me, I am also saying to them.
Such as?
Well, my strong belief in fairness, in trying to do the very best you can, especially around, I'm raising daughters. In the 60s, it was very difficult, I think, for me as a woman, a young woman, trying to get an education. There were many things that I had to struggle with, and my children I don't think have that difficulty today, and I believe it's because of affirmative action. In many instances, also, they're very bright.
That helps.
Yeah.
But you were very bright too, so.
Well, I think it was very difficult, and sometimes I think they don't understand some of the challenges both my husband and I had to overcome. And in Southern California, in the 60s, it was very difficult to get into, if you were Hispanic, to get into let's say, a nursing program. And I was told that I would not succeed, and I remember feeling really bad about that, and I was very lucky to have friends and also teachers that encouraged me to look elsewhere. And I did go to New York, and I was accepted to many nursing programs that I applied to there. yet sometimes I would feel during the time I was in school that maybe I wouldn't succeed because I kept hearing that I wouldn't. So it was a struggle to my self-esteem, and I think that's one of the things that I'm always fighting and trying to encourage people that you can do it.
Did it make you more determined?
Yeah, it did. And I think there was a little bit anger and stubbornness behind it, like, I'll show you I can. And I think it's okay to have that.
You've been very active in encouraging low-income and minority women to do very positive things with their lives. I think you get them involved in practical nursing, is that correct? Do you find some of them in positions where they have been told or they feel intimidated or they feel they can't succeed, and how do you help them get over that?
Well, by giving them a lot of positive reinforcement, for one. I think a lot of the women that I worked with back in New Jersey in the early 70s were women that didn't have opportunities, that, let's say, they married right out of high school, or maybe didn't even complete high school, started a family, their marriages weren't successful, or some were, but they were looking for a better quality of life, and maybe they were restless, I don't know, but they came through a particular program that was called CETA at that time, and all of them wanted to improve the quality of their life. They just needed to be given the opportunity and a structure where that they would have childcare so that they would be able to attend classes. And the program was very, very successful. The women came together. They were not competitive. They were very supportive of each other. They helped each other. If one was struggling with a particular area, you would see people helping that person. And we became like just a real tight group. And all of them succeeded. Some went on to RN programs, and others stayed in practical nursing, working in hospitals. You could see that their self-esteem greatly improved. They were able to increase, or not increase, to improve the quality of their lives. And they really felt good about themselves, and I really liked that.
Today, you live in West Marin, which is, we call it over the hill.
Right, right.
The other side of the hill. It's a very different community than East Marin. Don't you think sometimes people think there really aren't low-income women in Marin County, and yet the area you live in is replete with low-income minority women who need opportunities? Do you think to some extent they've been ignored?
Well, I think that they're a real isolated group of people that are living, mainly the Hispanics that I know in West Marin, live on remote ranches. I don't know about being ignored. I think that slowly that is changing. I think early on many of them, well, they didn't drive. They weren't visible. You didn't see them except when they would come into town to go to well baby clinics or go to the doctor's office. I think that the work that is being done at the West Marin Health and Human Services Center in Point Reyes Station has brought these people out and has encouraged them to be participants in the West Marin community, and I think the West Marin community is richer for it.
Tell me about your work in the Well Baby Clinic and the West Marin Health Services. What do you do, and what does it do for you as a person?
Well, when you say West Marin, you need to know that I also work in the Canal area, and
That's right.
And for many years I also worked in Marin City. So these are the three areas, and there are probably more where I come in contact with a lot of low-income people. The clinics that we had in West Marin, at the Well Baby clinics, were great. because once a month we would open our doors and women would come with their children, and we would have nurse practitioners who would examine the children, spend time with the mother, answer any question they might have regarding nutrition or questions about their development, the children's development, about how to treat common colds or things like that. And they would also then be examined and get immunizations. The nicest thing about those clinics were that all these women would come together. They hadn't probably seen each other for at least a month. So they would come together at this clinic, and it would be constant chattering.
It was socialization.
It was a social thing, and you saw, I mean, they were just so happy, and they were sharing and sharing food, or they would bring messages from maybe another relative or a friend. So it became a really social time for them, and it was really nice to see that. Many of the women, now this is changing, and I think it's for the better, but many of the women didn't drive. And so they were very dependent on their husbands, who worked long hours and many days. Sometimes they would only have one day off a week. So the women...
These are primarily ranch workers, ranch employees.
They're called milkers, right. So the women wouldn't be able to get off the ranch except on their husband's day off, and that usually involved going shopping. So we encouraged a lot of the women to, we would bring the little DMV book that's in Spanish, and for them to read and to learn about what the rules and regulations are here. And many of them did. And all those remote roads out in West Marin, you would see these women, you know, learning to drive. So many of our women learned to drive, and from that, their world became bigger.
What about your work in the Canal District? That's a very interesting part of Marin County also, which I think many people often forget about in the great scope of Marin County. How did you get involved there? What did you do? And what were the needs of the people in the Canal District?
Well, I just started to work in the Canal area the last couple of months, and one of the reasons that I'm there, and it was a wise decision by my supervisor, is that because I speak Spanish, that I should have been there a long time ago. Most of the time I was spending in Marin City. I like working in the Canal area. There's a lot of life going on. There are a lot of it feels like a lot of activity, a lot of action, so to speak. I think in many ways the people in the Canal area have it much more difficult than the people that I've worked with in West Marin. The people in West Marin are traditional families. They come as a single unit. Usually the husbands first come, find work, get settled, and then bring their family, and they come to a home, a dwelling. But in the Canal area, you have people from Central America, South America, people that come from like Guatemala or El Salvador, that have very sad histories. A lot of single people, and it's very expensive to live in Marin County, so they double and triple or more in apartments. And sometimes when I go and visit families, sometimes there's maybe 12 people in a two-bedroom apartment, and you can see how that could cause all kinds of problems.
Sometimes do you feel like maybe you're getting too close, or you need to remember to distance yourself, or do you feel like it's better to become close?
Oh, I like being close to people. I wish that I had more time to be with the people that I work with, but there are so many issues in the Canal area that sometimes I can only be there 1 or 2 visits and then I'm out, and I have to try to stay really focused to get in most of the information I feel like I need to give those people.
What are your goals for those people, Rebecca?
Well,
if you were to set the goals for yourself personally, in addition to just your work.
Well, I always always tell my families that I work with, or young single mothers or young men, that to succeed in this country, you need to learn the language of the country. And so I strongly urge that they take the time to learn English. Many work 2 or 3 jobs, but it's going to be always at a low minimum or below minimum wage. I've seen that the more English skills people have, the more opportunities they have. So that's one of the first things that I'll tell my families. I also, the families that I have that have children in school, strongly encourage them to do whatever it takes to allow their children to stay in school. And I'm always looking for scholarships or things like that to help those families. There's something about the families, that the Hispanic families, even in their poverty and in the pain and suffering, they're very giving and very spiritual people. And so I try to foster that because I think that gives people a lot of strength to go on. And
was that part of your strength in being able to do what you do, is to have that kind of family support? You have support from your family, as well as a kind of faith and spiritual support. Has that been important to you?
It has, but you see, I'm 3rd generation, so I'm kind of totally acculturated. But I see the value of it. And several years ago, a group of us women from West Marin went to New Mexico. My girlfriend, Gayanne, was celebrating her 50th anniversary, 50th birthday. And have you ever been to New Mexico?
Yes.
It's a very spiritual place. And we went to a lot of the little churches and chapels. And it was a very spiritual experience for all of us. And I think it's really important to have that in one's life. And I do value it.
Do your children ever ask you to talk about Hispanic heritage, or do you talk with them about cultural heritage? Have you, as they've grown up? I know you're 3rd generation, but I mean, have you had to kind of go back and say, here's what we need to remember, here's what we need to do?
Well, I think what happened to me was growing up in Southern California in the
60s, we both did.
All right. It was a time where it was discouraged to have a second language. And my parents thought that they were being helpful to us. And so we were raised in a family that didn't speak much Spanish. And so I always have felt bad that we didn't have that experience. It wasn't until I went to Puerto Rico with my husband that I did learn to speak Spanish and felt a real strong kind of cultural pull and the need to get in touch with my cultural identity. And it was about the time when also the black culture was very popular, and the Chicano movement. And so I was very liking that because it made me feel good, and I think that I wanted that for my children. And we're in an area where, in West Marin, where my kids haven't really identified a whole lot with the Hispanic community. And one of the ways we've tried to deal with that is the activities that I'm involved in. I've brought my children to many of those activities. Also, my oldest daughter went to Puerto Rico for a year. And she came back speaking Spanish and moving the way a Latina woman moves.
How did you feel about that?
I like that. I think she really got into that culture and identified with her roots. And I think that helps. It helps you with your self-esteem, I think, and it helps you kind of discover who you are. When she went to Puerto Rico, I'm sure she saw a lot of people that looked like her. You know, short people, dark-skinned people, and she didn't feel real different. And my youngest daughter, Yolanda, will probably be going in her junior year to Puerto Rico for a year.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I do.
That's terrific. Now, you do so many different things, Rebecca. First of all, how difficult was it raising a family, having a husband, and doing all the things that you've done? How difficult?
It's not easy. I think you know that. You have 4 children, and then the long distance driving, and being involved the way I get involved. But I had a lot of support from my husband, and living out in the park, I think, made it easier in a sense. My kids weren't influenced a whole lot by, I don't know, by television, for one, because our reception was really poor. And so they had to find other things to entertain themselves with. And we have a real supportive community out there.
But do you ever have fun?
Yeah. I feel real lucky. Actually, I have a lot of fun in my work. Doing the community organizing was a lot of fun. And I love working with the Hispanic community. So I do. I have fun.
Do you think it was more difficult for women such as yourself to do the work that you're doing? Has it changed since the 60s, do you think?
Oh, I think so. I do. I think it's always a struggle, but I think that there are more opportunities for women to succeed in, I mean, just working in a hospital setting now. I can remember when I first started working, I rarely saw women physicians, and I see lots now. And so that would be a good example. Also, when the California Rural Legal Assistants took on a case that around a 5-year-old child who was not admitted to a particular school, the 2 attorneys that took the case were women. And I really liked that, and I wanted to pull my girls out of school and bring them to the hearings because I wanted them to see these women, because I saw them as role models.
Let's take a girl about to go into high school, and you, Rebecca Porrata, who have achieved everything you have achieved, which is really wonderful, wonderful things for the community. What would you say to a girl that age in terms of what she should strive for in her high school years and maybe beyond?
I would say to find something that is of real interest to you, and then to pursue that. I would encourage young women to stay in school and to get an education, even though sometimes it's hard to stay in school. I would encourage them to stay in school.
How hard is it for kids, for instance, in the Canal District to stay in school? Is it difficult?
I think it's difficult when you don't have the support of a parent. Sometimes our families encourage their kids, because of economic survival, to work, to bring in income, to help sustain the family. So it's a struggle.
Are there special problems for immigrants today? Do you think because of the economy is the way it is in the United States that they're facing maybe even more prejudice? Or do you see that when you work?
I think, yes, and you're seeing more of that here in liberal Marin County, and I think you've probably read about it in the newspapers. I think it's a direct result of the economy. I see that many of the families that I work with, though are employed, are working as gardeners, are raising the children of Marin County. But for some reason there's a huge threat right now from people that are hurting, and they're feeling probably that this group of people are taking something away from them, and that's very unfortunate.
You've been honored by many different groups and people. I mean, it's not just this group. When you are honored, does it surprise you? You seem like such a modest person.
It does. It does surprise me, because I don't think I'm working alone. I work with lots of people, and we're all kind of, we come together and I just wish the whole group would be honored. Oftentimes that's how I feel about it.
Did you always have the incredible self-esteem you have today, or do you think you have an incredible amount of self-esteem? How do you feel?
I think that I was very lucky in the people that I met along the way in my life who made me feel that I was important, that I mattered, who encouraged me. And that's kind of what I want to give the young people that I work with, that they matter, that I care about them.